Hello, 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 and a big warm welcome to one and all. My name is Simon. Not that that matters all that much. What matters a whole lot more is today's topic, brushes with death. And this time we have a little dedication to Mina with love and squalor. Over the years, as a counsellor, I've heard a lot of people recounting personal stories about how close they came to death at various times in their lives. Sometimes the margins for the continuation of life seem so very, very thin. Sometimes these sliding doors moments where 1 second too late or 1 second too early and its curtains hold a real element of curiosity and mysticism for people. There's a real need to get to grips with what happened, trying perhaps to frame the events so that it can be assimilated into our own narrative, our own identity, our own reality. Like, what on earth was that all about? Did good fortune smile upon me? Was it fate or destiny that allowed me to fight another day? Or am I just lucky? Is life and death as random as rolling a dice? And what of the people who didn't make it? Who didn't have the luck of the draw? Who were at the wrong place at the wrong time? Who picked up a chance card on the Monopoly board and it really wasn't a good card? Before we start in earnest, I just want to say that while Self-Detective Club strives to be a space that is safe as it can be, this episode might well be triggering for some. So if you want to err on the side of caution and give it a miss, that seems pretty sensible to me. Okay. This is what the poet Luis de Góngora was thinking about in the 6th century. Fortune presents gifts not according to the book, because in a village, a poor lad has stolen 1 egg. He swings in the sun, and another gets away with 1,000 crimes. When you expect whistles, it's flutes. When you expect flutes, it's whistles. Think of how many different places we've occupied in our lives, the different time zones, the different people we've encountered, and the different decisions we've made moment by moment. Apparently, we make around 35,000 decisions every day. So presumably, if we are still alive at this very moment in time, can we say, at the least, that we got ourselves to this point? I mean, perhaps we have plenty of scars and wounds from living. Perhaps there's been a lot of things happen to us that have been out of control, out of our control. But could we afford ourselves a wee pat on the back? That decision-wise, we've done okay-ish. I'm really quite taken with this idea. We have birthdays. They help act as a yardstick, a celebratory milestone. We have anniversaries that help us to remember events. In Mexico, they have El Día de los Muertos. From pagan times, we have Halloween, a thin place where the veil between the living world and the ancestral world is at its closest. But there doesn't seem to be any cultural space to stop and take stock of how close we or our loved ones came to dying. So this, dear listener, is our own little plot, our own pop-up shop devoted to such a venture. So naturally enough, I hope this episode will spark something for you. For me, once I get a thread of inquiry in my mind, I find it hard to let go because I really don't like unfinished business. I want to follow it through to its natural conclusion, if there is one in the offing. So let's see how we get on. And as someone who often goes to musical lyrics to help give me a starting point to a theme, I must admit, I am struggling a bit with this one. Loss and grief, yes, plenty of stuff. But near misses, not so much. I find this quite frustrating, as no doubt there'll be loads of stuff out there. I just haven't found it yet. But this is what I have found so far. Bill Callahan, under the moniker Smog, is singing a song. He's called it Lazy Rain. And midway through this song, he casually let slip that me and a friend of mine, we just cheated death. Just like that. No details, no explanations. And then he sings, "Now I'm walking home for death's rain check." I mean, what the hell? Come on, Bill. You've got to say more about this event. You can't just... Well, obviously you can, and obviously you have. But this is kind of my point. There are dishes to be cleaned and new foods to be served. Nobody died, and the travelator of life moves on because there is no real pause to reflect button. Having said that, Dr. Alimentando had much time to ponder in hospital while he was recovering from a bus driving into him, the bus taking offense at his dreads. He wrote of the experience, "If you have no reason for living, gosh, don't determine my life." And now I'm moving on to Andrew Bird. Whiskey plied, voices cried, fratricide. Jesus, don't you know that you could have died? You should have died. I'm not a big fan of the word should, but should have died gets me into a real spin. He also sang, "And we'll dance like cancer survivors, like you're grateful simply to be alive. The prognosis was that you should have died." Grateful to be alive. Yes, this is what I want. And now it's over to Joe Henry and the Ohio Air Show plane crash song. Just before the crash, I was at the bridge. I remember now somebody shouting, but I couldn't hear too well. And when it went into a dive, we all came off our feet. And just like he meant to nose into the lake, he did so perfectly. Just before the crash, I was watching you, thinking how time hasn't changed, even half of what it promised to. When I felt him hit the bridge, at first I thought it was me. Yeah, this does it for me. Gives me more of a platform. I'm now holding a thread. I can see more connections, so now I'm moving over to Nico Case. When I'm walking in the dark, I'm free to covet all I want. You've made it all so very dangerous. I can't stay away. If I meet you in the night, you're free to covet all you like. Don't you try and stop me. I cling tightly to this life. Clinging tightly to this life. Yes, I like that. I'm having that. National Public Radio ranked the next song as the 33rd greatest song by a female or non-binary artist in the 21st century. It's Avant-Gardener by Courtney Barnett. My hands are shaky, my knees are weak. I can't seem to stand on my own 2 feet. I'm breathing, but I'm wheezing, feel like I'm emphyseming. The paramedic thinks I'm clever because I play guitar. I think she's clever because she stops people dying. Anaphylactic and super hypochondriac. Should have stayed in bed today. I much prefer the mundane. I take a hit from an asthma puffer. I do it wrong. I was never good at smoking bongs. Aha! And that reminds me of bong water. What keeps you going? What keeps you moving? What keeps it on and on? Great radio. Great radio. In moments of desperation, in moments of loneliness, in moments of darkness, what keeps us going? Personally speaking, the radio has been priceless for me. No radio, no DJs. No DJs, no music. No music, no sense of the world. I would be screwed. Because school didn't teach me how to stay alive with my own crazy thoughts, nor did my parents. But that's just me. What about you? What inspirational words have kept you going when you most needed them most? What inspirational words have kept you going when you most needed them? Okay. And pause. And breathe. And now to play scripts. There is an English phrase, an idiom, like a cat on hot bricks, which was then modified in Southern America to become cat on a hot tin roof. The idea being that under the oppressive heat of the sun, a cat has to move quickly and cleverly on the thin metal, otherwise it isn't going to survive for very long. In the play of the same name by Tennessee Williams, the main character, Maggie, is leading a precarious life. When her indifferent husband asks her, "What's the point of being a cat on a hot tin roof?" she replies, in the third person, "Just staying on it, I guess, as long as she can." He suggests she jumps off. After all, cats can jump and do not get hurt. But he's missing the point. She's a survivor. She's too invested in what she has striven for to give up now. Could Maggie be a role model for any of us who doggedly refuse to go quietly into the night? And now to prose, starting with an account written in True Tales of American Life by David Anderson. It's about a photojournalist, Thomas. He's covering a story in South Africa in 1994. His motorcade ends up in a gunfight between white rebels and black soldiers. He protects his body from the bullets by hiding behind a car. When it's safe to flee, Thomas does so. A couple of days later, he is invited into an editing room by a person who had filmed the occasion. In the footage, he sees himself hiding behind the car, but he also sees a black soldier. Quote, "His weapon is pointing not at the rebels, but at the oblivious photographers. He shakily raises his weapon, squeezes the trigger, and click. Nothing happens. The soldier hesitates and examines his weapon. It has jammed. A sharp whack ejects the bullet. The soldier reloads. Click. Again, nothing. Another whack, another ejected bullet, and another reload. Click. Nothing again. And then outside the field of vision, a distraction occurs. The soldier flees the scene. Thomas slumps in the editing booth. He has just seen his own death. End quote. How messed up is that? How many times might we have come close to death without even realizing it, unless by remote chance someone else happens to point it out to us? And now to fiction, more specifically Sylvia Plath. Here she is at the very last line of her novel, The Bell Jar. I took a deep breath and listened to the old brag of my heart. I am, I am, I am. The main character survives. The book survives. And indeed, this very line, I am, I am, I am, has continued its life and has become a main title of another book, this time by Maggie O'Farrell. Here she gives her readers 17 accounts of how she nearly died at various points in her life. For example, swimming in the sea, ill health, or at the hands of another person. Some of these episodes could be considered incredibly close shaves, while others may not have been quite so dangerous, but still remain vivid in her mind. So is it okay, dear listener, to ask you directly, how many times have you come close to dying? And if you have stories to tell, would it be worthwhile, on a wellness focus level, to share your story in your own words? Because you are alive to tell the tale. And because externalizing the internal is the main part of healing. So yeah, if you want to talk about your lived experience with others, go ahead. And if you'd like to join in on a part 2 of this episode, go ahead. Or if you'd like to send in an audio clip or some words for me to read out, here's the address: podcast@selfdetective.net. That's podcast@selfdetective.net. As for myself, I too have some stories that I'm happy to share, if it helps you tap into your own well. I mean, having lived now for over half a century, I have racked up a fair few instances, I would say. So, for a start, I'm pretty lucky to have been born in the first place, given that my mother didn't think she could cope with another child, didn't want another child, and was all set to have an abortion. Which is all fair enough. No complaints there on my part. I get it. It's her body. But, or better still, and, as the story goes, a nurse came into the ward and said no to my mum. This no-nonsense nurse, who had never met my mum before, told her not to do it right at the very moment she was about to do it. So she didn't. I guess she was young, impressionable. And here I am. Here I still am, and still wondering who that nurse was. My very own Lady of the Lamp, who brushed away my death. Thank you, whoever you are. I'd like to think that I made the most of this opportunity that came my way. Moving on, when I was 9 years old, I lived in a place called Burnley Wood. The time was the 1970s. 2 up, 2 downs, outside loos, men with rickets, looking to us young kids like cowboys. I was in a street gang. We'd sneak into building sites at night because we were bored, because our brains were not yet firing on all cylinders. And we were largely fearless. We wound up a dog called Brutus to see if he'd attack us. We'd lie in the middle of the road and could only get up on the orders of the games master. Even if a car was coming, we had to wait for their command. To me, this is so reminiscent of the very comic strips I was reading at the time, where the young characters were always cheating death while they played their pranks. Ha ha ha, isn't life a breeze for a kid in the Beezer and the Beano? Which one would they succumb to at the end of the strip? A black eye or a proper spanking? Ha ha ha, tra ra ra boom die. Padiham is pretty close to Burnley, and it has a public pool. As kids, we found it funny because the L was missing from the sign, so we had lots of sillies around swimming in poo, poo swimming in you, yada yada. The pool had a springboard, it had a diving board, and an even higher still diving board. My sister and I stared at this top board for years. We'd often stop what we were doing to watch people jump off. We were in awe of it, petrified by it. One day, our curiosity got the better of us as we egged each other up the steps. I can still remember, or at least I think I can, how nervousness made my feet so hypersensitive to the non-slip coating of the ladder. Once we got to the top, it was every bit as terrifying as I thought it would be. Now all my senses were alive. The noises were intense, the view panoramic, the smell of chlorine catching in my nose and throat. Needless to say, I had no intention of jumping off, but my sister had other plans. As I was holding onto the guardrail, she pushed me, and down I went, but only partially, because I was still holding onto the side. I kind of swung round, juddered, saw what was below me, and it wasn't the pool, clung on for dear life for a few seconds, and then let go. I have no comprehension of what happened afterwards, but I didn't go to a cemetery or even a hospital, and I did get an apology from my sister, both at the time and many years later. So all is good there, no harm done, no grudges. By the way, there is a great short video called Hop Tornet, or 10-meter tower, created by Axel Danielsson and Maximilian van Eertrik, which explores the theme of fear via a diving board. I know it's not wholly connected to what we're talking about right now, but I highly recommend it, and I'll definitely put a link in the show notes. Okay, so now I am 11 years old, and I'm living in Liverpool. I am playing in a garden, rocking back and forth on a cylindrical slab of a cut-up tree trunk. And I'm beside a shed, and when I lose my balance, I reach out to grab some wires that are sticking out of the brickwork. Only the wires are live, and I experience a huge explosion of light, as well as being hurtled, or both, some distance away. If you've seen the electric guitar scene in Back to the Future, that's what I equate it to. But here's the thing. I don't remember anyone being there with me. I don't remember telling anyone about it, or anyone being that wowed about it. But now, as I'm recounting this, I'm like, bloody Nora. And now I am 14, still alive, and still living in Liverpool. Me and a friend of mine, we want to grow our very own cannabis plants, but we don't want to be caught by the police. So we take our seeds through Otterspool Park and under a fence, and we bury them in amongst the railway lines, thinking, well, no one will ever find them there. And we go back to water them a few times, except one time, funnily enough, there's a train coming, like really fast, and now the tracks are electrified. And now I'm frozen, standing in between those tracks. But then I jump to safety because my friend and fellow numpty has shouted at me, imploring me to jump, so I do, and life goes on. And now I have just turned 20. I'm living on the south coast, and I have a chance to take a lift in a car that's driving to the capital. But I choose not to. Why do I choose not to? I mean, everything about the trip suggests a good time, but I say no. And the person who takes my place, the person who is randomly asked at the last minute if she would like to go to London because there is a seat free, she dies on the way back following a crash. Please tell me, what is that all about? There is not a month that goes by when I don't think about this and wonder. I wonder about her, I wonder about me, and I don't think I have survivor's guilt, but I do feel a strong bond to this person. And that bond has stayed with me throughout my entire adult life. By the way, while we're on the theme of bonds, I had a miserable time at school. There's no getting away from it. Not all the time, but most of the time. I had friends who kept me sane, who kept me from darkness long enough for me to find my feet eventually. So thank you so much. You know who you are. But, and, there is one person in that hideous, heartless, wretched institution who helped me the most, without even trying. Because even though we rarely spoke, because I was painfully shy, and because she was a girl, and because of the hostile culture we existed in, a friendship wasn't going to happen. Nonetheless, I absolutely idolized her. I'm saying this with words from my older head now. I found her so authentic, so nice. There was such a calm inner peace to her, while I was anything but. And yes, of course, I put some of that onto her. Projection, transference, whatever you want to call it. But it kept me going. That's the thing. I still have the essence of her to this very day, incorporated into my own being, because just like the bond I have with the person who traded places with my death, the bond I have with this barely known person has also been super important to my well-being. And I realize that I've done the same thing throughout my life. There are bits of kids, bits of adults, bits of fictional characters that swirl in and out of my consciousness, and together they have all kept me from expiring. But what do you make of this, dear listener? Is this something you've done too? Is this a human thing? Okay, I'm now in my late 20s. I'm swimming in Greece with my partner. We are on an island called Sifnos. There is a place where lots of people have gathered to swim and bathe. To get to the sea, you jump off a boulder. How many people jumping off that boulder are thinking of how they might get back onto dry land again? How many people would study the water for a moment and think, oh, maybe that's not such a good idea after all, because of the swell or whatever it might be. But my partner and I, we jump in and we swim away from the throngs And then when we tire and it's time to return, we find we can't. The water won't let us back to the boulder. There are people dotted here and there. They don't seem to realize that separately, my partner and I have gone into a life or death situation. And now we have started to resign ourselves to dying because we are utterly, utterly exhausted. Our limbs unable to make any headway. Every time we get closer to land, we are pushed away. I don't know how many times we were rebuffed. I don't even quite know how she managed to get past the waves and then reach up to grapple with the boulder and heave our bodies onto it. Maybe there was a small window of opportunity where the conditions suddenly, briefly became favorable. But honestly, I don't truly know. And even though my partner and I are still together, we just don't talk about it. And this is what puzzles me a great deal. This Greek moment in my life barely registers with me anymore, even though I was there, even though I was present at the time that I nearly died. Yet it doesn't take up a fraction of the drive I've spent wondering about the time I nearly died when I wasn't actually there, when I didn't step into the car. Does this make sense? It makes me realize how super selective I'm being with my memories, my traumas, and how I portray what's happened, which on the one side comes from a wholly unreliable witness, and on the other side seems to come from a very important and skilled creator of my own museum. From the 1970s to the 1990s, the Irish Republican Army brought the Troubles to England, just as I guess as England had brought the Troubles to Northern Ireland when the settlers arrived in the 17th century. Living in London during the latter part of this time frame, there were constant reminders on the underground and on the buses to be vigilant for suspicious-looking bags lying unattended. Whether we spoke about it or not, as daily travellers, we all collectively knew that we could die at any moment, that we could be in the vicinity of a device just as it was being detonated. Sigmund Freud spoke of a life drive, eros, yet he also considered thanatos, the notion that humans have a death drive too, which can lead to all sorts of risky behaviors. I don't know if my 11-year-old self experience of being blown backwards by the force of an electric shock left a lifelong impression on me. Either way, during the IRA campaign, I often found myself loitering around, say, briefcases that have been discarded in bins. In my fantasy head, the bomb would go off and the force of the explosion would lift me high into the air, like a bungee jump in reverse. What a thrill! What a thrill it would be! And of course, this fantasy had nothing to do with the reality of what would actually have happened. And then the police would cordon off the area with barrier tape, and they would tell me to stop being weird and to bugger off. At the same time, I was also having a parallel process with my 14-year-old self when I stood on the tube platforms. Upon hearing a rumble from the tunnel that forewarned passengers of the imminent arrival of the train, I would get a rush of adrenaline as I imagined what it would be like to run at the train, to meet the energy of the train full on smack. Comic book superheroes are always smashing into things with little consequence to their well-being. Wham, bam, it's clobbering time. I wanted some of that, like so desperately. Thankfully, my life drive always kicked in. Sometimes this life force would have to pin me to the station wall, like it knew me all too well, like it knew I couldn't be trusted. I spent a lot of my life hitchhiking. I've met so many interesting strangers in this way, and I've had so many enriching conversations about all sorts of random stuff. It seems such a shame to say that I stopped doing this pretty abruptly in my mid-20s when a male driver told me he was going to kidnap me and take me back to his tower block in Cheetham Hill, Manchester. I managed to wriggle out of that situation by properly doing his head in. This was like the complete opposite of Stockholm Syndrome. The idea of befriending this person never entered my mind. Instead, I made myself so oppositional, so objectional, so, excuse my French, frickin' obnoxious, that the van screeched to a halt and he ordered me to get out. Now, I can't say this for sure, but there was something about this situation, where even though he was physically stronger than me, I felt like I had the upper hand, psychologically speaking. But of course I can't say for sure. At the same time as playing mind games with him, of constantly altering what he was saying and going off on my own tangents rather than staying with his agenda, I also had 3 keys sticking out of my clenched fist for the whole of the journey as a backup. And in hindsight, I really don't think they would have been much use. So well done me. Who would have thought there was such a devious head wrecker waiting in the wings once the use only in an emergency button had been pressed? To end my 20s, I had 2 house fires. One completely my fault, using a cracked shell for an ashtray, not stubbing out the fag properly, and then promptly falling asleep, and then having a dream that my room was on fire, which it was, and in this dreamlike state, I went to the bathroom with a bowl, filled up the water, and put it out, which I also did in real life. And another time, which was nothing to do with me, I hope, and everything to do with dodgy electrics. Man, so much was lost in that fire, but not my partner or myself. We were out of the house at the time, so let's strike that one off the board. And then there was the cycling. Did I wear a helmet? No, I was invincible. Did I develop an antennae for potential dangers like car doors opening suddenly? Yes, very much so. Did I end up on the bonnet of a few cars that pulled out from side streets? Oh yes. But you know what was the biggest risk to me as a London cyclist back in the day? Cycle lanes. I kid you not. These new lanes were designed to give bikes more parity with cars, more safety. Bloody death traps they were, funneling you here and there, and then suddenly abandoning you as the paint on the road runs out and you're left high and dry in the middle of the traffic. I know they are better now, but bloody hell, crazy, crazy stuff. The other risk to me as a cyclist was myself. There was a moment in time in my 30th year on this planet when I was embroiled in a big life drama which lasted about 2 months and occupied most of my headspace. Suddenly, rather than just pedaling between home and work, I was also having to do round trips to a hospital as well, and I wasn't coping very well. This spilled out in my behaviour as a cyclist. So whereas before I would give cars the right of way, of course you give cars the right of way, well, now I was cutting cars off, forcing them to brake, because I just needed to get to my destination super fast. One car that I cut up as I was heading down a one-way street, the wrong way, was so mad at what I'd done that they tried to run me over by reversing into me. Luckily, I heard the screeching of the tyres and managed to dart into a gap between the parked cars and then make my escape on the pavement. I could have learned from that incident, but I didn't. I carried on in the same vein, and the next time was much worse, because this time I cut up an army vehicle, and in the back of this army vehicle was a group of young male recruits, and they weren't best pleased. I'm putting this mildly, and I think, but I'm not sure, but I think my lack of enthusiasm for the armed forces might have got the better of me. As in, I think I might have communicated this in some way. Either way, the situation escalated very quickly, and they all became contagiously furious. To be blunt, they became collectively berserk. These guys, around 6 of them, they jumped off the back of the vehicle and started chasing me on foot. I have no doubt about their motives and intentions. They were going to rip me from limb to limb. So good job my spidey senses came to the fore and my alarm system kicked in. I cycled head first towards a wall, a pretty high wall, and I jumped and I scrambled over that wall. And on the other side of that wall there was safety and a continuation of life, minus my bike. A cranial osteopath told me later that my nerve endings had imploded due to the big drama that was going on, and that basically for those 2 months I was a zombie. I wonder if this might explain my actions, and also how only now, with the distance of 2 decades, I'm finally opening the lid on this a little. I think before I dismissed it as something I'd exaggerated or even made up, or just that it wasn't all that important in the scheme of things. But no, now I'm pretty convinced that this was a top 3 near-miss incident. Okay, we're coming to the end of this episode. I just have one more scenario to offer you, and then we can all go home and try to forget how vulnerable we are. During the pandemic, my partner got into making kombucha, and it was very delicious. To this day, I don't think I've tasted anything quite as intense as her rhubarb variety, and whenever I drink a shop-bought one, my heart sinks a little. As the restrictions on our lives eased up, the production process of bottling the juice, storing it in the fridge, and consuming it slowed down. Just before it stopped for good, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my daughter and her boyfriend. It's early evening on Halloween, and everything is calm, and life is good, and the pumpkins are taking shape nicely. The explosion we hear was super loud, it was like, whoa, what the hell was that? It definitely came from inside the house, inside the kitchen. But when we look around, we can't see anything obvious. It's only in the moments that follow that we can piece together what happened. And this is where it gets a bit creepy, a bit freaky. From the glass and the wetness, we work out that the cause of the bang is a bottle of kombucha that has been sitting on the island throughout the day without being burped. I mean, man, you've really got to burp those things. If my partner had been a domestic terrorist, then this improvised pipe bomb was pretty effective. Not only because the glass spread everywhere, but because the shards were really, really nasty, like wafer thin with serrated edges. Before we tidied up, we treated the kitchen like a crime scene. We got forensic, and this is what we couldn't understand, and why we still feel a need to talk about it to this very day. I said that the glass went everywhere. We were sitting less than 2 feet away from the epicenter of the blast. Our heads were at the same level as the island. We found big shards, small shards, microscopic shards all around the table. So why, dear listener, why didn't any of the shards rip into us when so many of them flew past our heads? Why did we come out of this episode unscathed, all 3 of us? It just doesn't make sense. It still doesn't make sense. As I said, this happened on Halloween, or Samhain, if you wish. Now, I'm not much of a spiritual person, but I do wonder. That's all I'm saying. I wonder. This could be a cue for a Disney song. Instead, though, to help us transition from this subject back into the here and now of our daily lives, let's stick with the grounding tradition of our outro from the Samphires. Take care till next time.